and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Shantae Russell, Vice President for Membership, AFCEA International.
Okay, good afternoon. So I hope everyone's had a wonderful conference so far. I could not think of a better way for us to close out our day than with this phenomenal lineup of professionals. It's an honor to welcome you to today's Emerging Leaders panel. So for those of you who may not know, our Emerging Leaders are made up of our members who are age 40 and under. Today's panelists are here due to their expertise in their fields, and they happen to be under the age of 40. You are in for a great session. To start, I would like to welcome and introduce you to our moderator for today, Andria Gagnon. As a proud U.S. Navy veteran and accomplished electronic engineer specializing in radio frequency communications, Andria brings over 20 years of experience across the defense, technology, and federal contracting sectors. She has served as a systems engineer for C5ISR programs across multiple agencies with cradle-to-grave solutions. Her background spans business development, project management, systems engineering, quality control, with a strong understanding of contracts, compliance, and implementation across both government and private industry. All right, let me breathe. She holds a bachelor's degree in business management and an MBA from Chaminade University. In addition to leading Lanakila Contracting, Andria serves as AFCEA International's Emerging Leader Vice President for the Indo-Pacific and the AFCEA Hawaii Chapter Emerging Leader VP. Please join me in a warm AFCEA welcome for Andria and our panelists.
That was long, I'm sorry. Wow, that was really long, I'm sorry. I'm really, I don't even know who wrote that. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We really, truly appreciate it. This will be a really fun panel. We have an incredible stacked panel of amazing young professionals here today. Emerging leaders just have such a unique viewpoint. We're the end users, and we're also the future leaders and decision makers. Having the ability to come up here and talk about such a huge topic in our AOR is truly a blessing and an honor to be here. The emerging leaders really have a mission-first mindset. While they're focusing on agility and speed, along with their intimate knowledge of technologies. It truly is, like I said, an honor to represent this amazing group of young professionals. I would like to start by introducing Captain Mason Millsap. Captain Mason Millsap is in the Marine Corps. He is a communications officer serving with MARFORPAC G6 as a C5I STR Systems Integration Officer with Genetic Warfare Lead on MARFORPAC Digital Transformation Team. In his role, he leads efforts to accelerate digital modernization, integrate emerging technologies, and advance operational concepts that strengthen command and control across the Indo-Pacific theater. He is also my deputy for the Emerging Leaders AFCEA Hawaii chapter, where he has been doing incredible things with bringing together military professionals and our industry members, creating hackathons, educational opportunities. I really can't explain how great and honored we are to have him on the panel. So thank you, Captain Millsap, if you would please stand.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Our next panelist, Miss Christine Devlin. Christine Devlin is a senior C4 ISR enterprise architect with over 20 years of experience supporting defense. She has focused on design and implementation for complex defense technology systems that directly support operational effectiveness across the Indo-Pacific region. Her background working with commercial contractors provides a distinctive external perspective on defense challenges, enabling her ability to apply innovative methodologies and best practices that bridge organizational silos and drive tangible mission outcomes. I would like to introduce Mr. Alan Delgado. Alan Delgado currently serves as the Division Chief for Joint Coalition Networks Division G64, U.S. Army Pacific. In this role, he leads strategic integration of modernization of mission partners, environments, enterprise IT systems, and coalition network interoperability across the Indo-Pacific. His portfolio includes oversight of joint and multinational communication support to major exercises and operations in collaboration with US Indo-PACOM, MAR4PAC, PACAF, and other allied partners. Last but definitely not least, I have the honor of introducing Major Stephen Sifuentes. Major Stephen Sifuentes enlisted in the Marine Corps in June 2003 as a 0341 Martyrman. Please excuse me, I'm not great at marine technology. Following the School of Infantry, then Lance Corporal Sifuentes received orders to 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, where he was deployed to Ramadi, Iraq, in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Upon his return, Corporal Sifuentes accepted an offer to attend the United States Naval Academy Commissioning Program, where he commissioned a United States Marine Corps 2nd Lieutenant in May of 2010. My first question for the panel, whoever would like to answer first. What examples of detailed conditions are you currently planning or have encountered in the Indo-Pacific AOR, and how does that geography and distance complicate those comms and planning?
So when it comes to detailed conditions, there are multiple sources that those could come from. Whether it's what we call EMS fratricide, which is like blue on blue. Maybe we have an active radar out there emitting on a similar frequency to some of our transmission systems. That would be EMS fratricide. And then you've got the congested aspect of the electromagnetic spectrum, which largely comes from white or civilian sources. And then obviously there's an adversarial piece to that as well that can, create those detailed conditions. And so a lot of times, like the blue on blue stuff, sometimes it's detailed conditions brought on because we didn't roll over a crypto key or something, so we lose connectivity. And those are more examples of what we can talk about and what we have experienced, because obviously we're not in crisis or conflict. So the red side, we can't really speak too much to in terms of what we've experienced. But we definitely have experienced the self-induced detailed conditions. So those are some examples, like the active radars, creating electromagnetic interference with our transmissions. And I think it all starts with, and I'm a big quotes guy. So there's a quote by Stanley Milgram. He was a social psychologist, a Yale professor, and he coined a one-liner: awareness is the first step to liberation. In this context, awareness is the first step to effective maneuver in the electromagnetic spectrum. So one of the ways that we're approaching how to manage, detail and maneuver to adapt to detailed conditions is building awareness of the electromagnetic spectrum. So understanding what sources of interference exist, what other blue forces are emitting out there, what commercial sources are out there, and then maneuvering appropriately when more RF-centric detailed conditions arise. Those are thoughts off the dome.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just super complex. Like, that's the hard part. It's hard to characterize, and define one example, right? And because of where we're operating, the adversary environment, the people that we're kind of, and then our own internal things, it's just super complex. And so being able to dynamically maneuver through different transport mechanisms that allow you to get information to the place at the time of need, becomes the focus point. So when you talk about conditions, it just assumes that things aren't going to be there. So it's availability and saturation. And then how do you dynamically maneuver through that? And do it at speed, and that becomes the challenging part, is doing it at speed that's relevant to whatever the specific mission set is, or whatever you're trying to launch, or whatever decision you're trying to make.
I'd also say BLOS, so beyond line of sight, is part of the game and part of the design for out here just having multiple land masses and going across a large ocean. I say on the space side, a lot of folks think space for space things, but in the actual architecture or design, especially in the game of proliferation, right? You're really trying to design a system that meets the beyond line of sight, requirements for C2 and operations, and then proliferate a system out there that can support not space for space, but space to terrestrial, and depending on what the actual environment is going to look like, being able to have your design built at speed and scale to meet not just those conditions, but transport and tracking conditions.
So when we talk about DDIL environments, we talk about DDIL in terms of unique places with unique challenges, right? But the thing about the Indo-Pacific theater that I think is not being talked about is that our environment, these unique problems in our environment in unique locations is not unique across the environment. DDIL is the norm in Indo-PACOM. And it is an environment that we're going to work with no matter how many points of presence we have throughout the theater. It is what we're going to fight in the future. It is our norm, and we should think about our DDIL environments in a way that facilitates us being able to operate in that normal environment, which is not normal. It just won't be in the future. So again, DDIL environments in the Indo-Pacific, it is not a when we will be degraded. It's not an if we'll be degraded, it's when we'll be degraded. And I think we have to think about that anytime we're thinking of solutions or problem sets within our theater, because it's not if, it's when, and we have to be ready for that.
Yes.
And I think you have to also take into account, like, it's not just the conditions that are set, but it's also who we're working with in partnership.
Exactly.
Like, you're talking about distributed forces that are not operating in U.S. space and like in CONUS, and so like all of those considerations of having to fight through it, and then working with partner forces, whether it's through RF or like networks, and how interoperability takes place. Like, you still have to be able to build the system of systems that allows you to be able to share information across bilateral partnerships in that same information space or in that same kind of DDIL type condition. I think that's specific to like Indo-PACOM because of the wide range of advanced like basing and access that we have, how we get approvals to be able to put systems online that allow us to fight through a DDIL environment. And then what we do in wartime when we all go to use the same frequency, the same spectrum, or the same space layer, like that's specific to Indo-PACOM.
No, and I really love that point, and I think that was, the focus and the mission of this panel with talking about DDIL is because, in our AOR, it's not an if, it is a when, and it is an everyday challenge, and it's something that we have to overcome very differently than other AORs. So that was a fantastic point, everybody. That was amazing, and I really love how that collaboration and partnership comes along through the panel. So that kind of drives me to the next question of, when we're talking about these DDIL considerations, like how are they driving the mission partnership environment? Like, how is the collaboration of PACOM as a whole and all of our entities that fall underneath it in that joint collaboration and coalition of forces impacting and also, helping in these DDIL discussions and planning?
I mean, I think you see it in ops, and in, as Steve said, I think we're in it already in that mission partner environment on the daily. So between, focusing on operations or exercises, and from our standpoint, we're focusing on the exercises piece, because it doesn't really matter if you bring like the most Gucci thing in there into the environment or to the exercise. If you come with your great playbooks and your pace plans, but you're not actually realistically building an environment that incorporates your mission partners and the different systems that they're on, and then going back and providing that feedback to your technology providers, then we're kind of in a deficit right off the bat. So at least on the space side, we can spend all day designing that perfect system to provide that BLOS capability, but it's not until we're in ops and we're in the experimentation space, if you're truly going to come and operate in a DDoL environment during exercise, which is a challenge in and of itself, you're not going to be able to see that partnership and those gaps that we have.
Just to riff a little more on the need for partners, I like quotes, I like Marine Corps doctrine too. Marine Corps Doctrine Publication 8, Information, talks about a few different information advantages that we seek to create and exploit, and one of those is systems overmatch. Systems overmatch refers to the advantages that our technical advantage yields in other warfighting functions. And if we're operating in the Indo-PACOM AOR as a joint force and considering our primary competitor, there are a lot of systems, a massive quantity of systems that we're considering, and as a U.S. joint force alone, we can't really create that overmatch effectively, so we need our partners to create that systems overmatch. And so we are taking Indo-PACOM's lead with the Indo-PACOM Mission Network. We're leaning in, wanting to adopt it as soon as it's ready. But from a Marine Corps perspective, we are much more considering the sensitive but unclassified environments. There's a lot more information that is available at the unclassified level, whether it's AIS or ADSB data, and we want to create an information environment where we can share unclassified data effectively at the lowest level. So for the lowest barrier to entry for our partners. Because another thing that's unique about Indo-PACOM, there are a lot of partners out here, but the range of agreements with those different partners, it drastically varies. When you think about Thailand and the Philippines and then Japan and Australia, we have various data sharing agreements that are, some are more, some are much less mature. So we have to consider all of that. So we're looking at sensitive but unclassified to essentially establish a single pane of glass at that level, and then moving up to the higher classifications for further exploitation. But I think sensitive but unclassified environments will continue to prove their value as we continue experimenting with them and using them operationally in the months and years to come.
But I think it ties to, especially in a DDoL environment, what specific information are you trying to get to what partner, and what sort of capability does that partner provide, to the bilateral coalition joint force, and then you can start to walk back from there. Okay, how do I get technology to enable getting that there faster? Sometimes we forget that if we provide this super high whiz, gadget that solves all of our problems, you realize that you're working with a bilateral partner that has access to some of the information. They've got their own networks, they've got their own fire control systems, and if we're talking about how do I launch a missile, I have to respect that there's a machine-to-machine integration problem, and then there's a getting them the information. To your point, where can I get it down at an unclassified or a shareable level, and engineer that, and then allow the process to be able to take place. But you got to focus in on what is the specific information that we're trying to share, and I think that's some of the complexity of the problem sets that we're wrestling with. And at the same time that we wrestle with it, now we're also trying to engineer the solutions that are going to enable that information sharing. And so it's I think we frequently in the technology world we find ourselves running concurrent with ops at the same time as driving engineering solutions, because we're all trying to solve the same complex problems.
So I think in terms of building partnerships with our allies and partners across the theater, we have to frame it in a way that I think we all, in terms of our drive to innovate, our innovation in C2, decentralized C2 and DDoL environments, I think that across the theater with our partners and allies, even though we speak different languages, we have different missions, we all come across the same problem, that being DDIL environment and how we operate in a degraded environment. So I think using that in order to convey to our partners that we understand your problem because we're having the same problem. And that's really driving what we're doing to innovate in the theater in terms of decentralized C2 and being able to operate in an environment that hasn't been operated in it before. So I think using that to push our drive and then answer these hard questions now, I think because no matter what languages we speak, no matter who we partner with in terms of US or all of our allies and partners in the theater, I think we all see the problem coming. I think we see the challenge coming. I think that is something that we should really focus in on. We all have this decentralized C2 issue. And in order to innovate, we have to work together. We have to consistently engage with our allies and partners to test, to test, to test. We fail today so that we can succeed tomorrow. And I don't want to see us at a point where something happens, God forbid in 2027, and we're testing.
Very much. That brings up a good topic. I mean, we have such a wonderful coverage between Compact Fleet, USERPAC, SpaceCom, and Mar4PAC. I'm going to ask, what is that biggest question? Like, or one of the biggest questions? What is one of those biggest questions that you face? And yeah, let's air that. Like, what is that biggest question?
For me, the biggest question that I run into for interoperability specifically is, how do I share data to partners that they can use, right? We have, in terms of the technical piece, we come to a point where we are at a crossroads between policy and technology. Okay, we're trying to solve policy problems through technological means, and that is the environment we work in, that is what we deal with. But for me specifically, with our partners allies, let's say Japan and Australia, there is no trilateral agreement between the United States, Japan, and Australia. But it is our mission and our duty to make sure that these partners and allies can share information in a way that both is available to them in policy-wise and is useful for them in real-world operations and exercises. And that is the crux of the problems that I run into, and how we can use all of this to facilitate the INDOPACOM's F2T2EA kill web initiative. That is a pain point for me, and I'm working every single day to try to figure it out.
What about you, Major?
I think trying to balance, again, like we have a certain equipment set that we have right now, and how do we balance like evolution, like modernization of that technology? How do you incorporate science and technology in there, especially as we look to like accelerate quickly some of these things? And then how do you balance that with like what you have today? How do you make it all smash together and work to get after the critical mission sets that you have? And I think that's the complexity, is like, what are some of those critical data flows, again, that can be enabled by technology, and how can we get there fast? And how can we get there fast, knowing that like we have the system that we have, whether that system changes, like it's not a fast system. So then how do I integrate all of the new kit and the things coming out that are going to get us there faster, and they're great. But at the same time, I go back to I still have my government computer, I log in, I chat with somebody, right? And that's going to be the systems that we go to war with. And so it's that balance of like being able to integrate it in quickly, iterate on it, like, and be able to work to kind of get it there faster, to be able to meet, again, those defined mission sets and the critical information exchanges that have to like get after winning whatever battle we want to win.
Yeah, the fun of balancing emerging technologies and legacy systems, right?
Yeah, it kind of goes into your point, Alan, about when the balloon goes up, if it does, are we going to be stuck in, with equipment that's being heavily tested and that kind of thing? And we talked a little bit about this before, this idea of balancing exploration and exploitation, getting good at what we have now, what we know we will have, versus exploring emerging technology. And developing prototypes. I mean, the Commandant of the Marine Corps in the annual update, I believe it was last year, a recent one just came out, but he talked about how we're going to fight the next war with prototypes. So that does create an interesting challenge in terms of getting good enough on the prototype so that they are legitimately value added versus getting good at what we already have because...
Well, and I think putting it in the hands of an 18-year-old and telling like, hey, like that small form factor kit, right, that we're going to give you and it's going to solve all the problems. Like, we need you to get in there and like start doing some coding to like engineer the connections that have to be made. The reality is like that's who's going to be operating the kit and the gear and the technology. To your point.
Yeah.
Ain't that the truth?
So when I evaluate like a solution that's come to us, right, to user pack specifically, right, I think about I make two assumptions in my head, or two questions. One is, again, how does it facilitate the F2T2EA kill chain, right? That includes redundant kill webs, because that is the goal of Indo-PACOM's Joint Fires Network right now, but they also have some other initiatives. And secondly, you have to assume that the enemy either already has this technology or knows that we're going to get it, right? So being a one-stop shop, we come back to the redundancy question, right? You have to take these solutions and ask these tough questions now, because we have to assume that the enemy is already planning ways to disable that capability. And every single solution that comes through our office, that's the two things that I think about. How does this push us forward in the fight, and how do we keep it in the fight?
I think just to piggyback off fighting with the prototype architectures, one of the biggest questions we always get is, what specifically is this proliferated LEO architecture actually providing that's different than what's already out there, right? And kind of the mantra for proliferation and spiral development is moving as fast as you can with modernized tech, right? Getting it in the hands of the warfighter, whatever age they may be, right? And ensuring that you have some level of interoperability and backwards compatible systems with what's already out there. And then the challenge is, when you do that, is are you actually fulfilling it in a multimodal condition to satisfy the current need of what they have in their current kit? And is your spiral development strategy actually adaptive enough to make those changes on the fly based off of the conditions they're in, the area that they're operating in, and the future plans that they have with the emerging technology that they're going to bring on? So I think, that question comes to us is, what are you bringing now that I can use right now? And then how are you developing that further to match with my changing mission profile and where I'm going to be operating? Because it's going to be the same today, but then it's going to change tomorrow.
So I want to piggyback on that, because that's a really great point, especially from an industry perspective. So I'm going to piggyback that with a question of, what are the most promising methods or investments that you're seeing in industry that are transforming these data architectures and maintaining the situational awareness and addressing the DDoS concerns in this AOR?
So I would say that some of the innovations that I've been seeing that I believe is worth exploring more is systems that empower our warfighter at the edge in terms of edge processing, artificial intelligence capabilities in a disconnected environment. I think that is going to be paramount to operations in the future, because I don't know if you've noticed, we have a new generation of warfighters. They're tech savvy, they understand how to work systems. They just need to be trained on them, and they need to understand why they're doing it. So because of that, developing systems that assist them in making real decisions at the edge and in operations without being connected to their centralized command and control point. We have to provide them the tools to make those decisions, because we have some very smart junior officers and enlisted that have the mental capabilities to make these decisions, and they're mature enough to do them. But we have to provide them with the tools in order for them to gain situational awareness on the battlefield and make those decisions on their own. And being able to do that in a disconnected environment is, I think, very important to the future of how we fight wars. And having those connection points, even in disconnected environments with intermittent, this is assuming we're in a D-Deal environment, which I assume we will be. This is having those connections, being able to, in any way, connect back to our centralized point and update so that the warfighter can gain another wave of situational awareness at speed without clogging their data streams or their data flows, so that they can, again, move on to the next decision, because we cannot rely on stationary or static circuits in this environment. There's just no possible way we can do that.
I think that, I mean, from an innovation standpoint, I mean, if I take the theme of the panel and it's DDIL, right? But then technology comes and says, hey, like there's this, again, cool kit that it does X, Y, and Z, but I'm going to go ahead and need a DISA circuit like to be able to operate it because of the high processing that it needs, and needs to be able to connect to data lakes, and needs to be able to connect to things that feed it. Like you're already kind of like, that's great if you're sitting at a headquarters element, and how do you build redundancy into those headquarters element? We're talking about continuity of operations, cooping those things. But then like when you start to push it forward, again, keeping DDIL at the forefront of the mind, it's like, okay, where can I push some of that processing forward in a meaningful way that takes into account, again, I'll always go back to the information exchanges that have to take place. I think technology that does take that into account, that how can I put data through smaller pipes, but that it's relevant and it's quick. I think those are the things that kind of enhance our lethality within particularly Indo-PACOM, but other places as well.
I think to piggyback off of Steve's comment, a couple of the things, not even space related, I think that are that the industry is pushing out right now that is really exciting. Yeah, we're seeing data architectures going from concept to reality. We're seeing edge processing becoming more advanced and using AI to actually like bring in automatic target recognition algorithms to make decisions. But I think also automatic spectrum management and being able to have that tool sets to pick the transport mechanism, depending on where you're at, which data you need to, and automatically doing that for us, which really buys down our time and then makes us less dependent on those DISA circuits and those nodes that we're always so dependent on right now.
Yeah.
And then I think really thinking through complete isolation and disconnection. And so we're starting to see within the industry like actual, not degraded, not intermittent, but completely isolation, and building that into a framework or into the critical design that's not just an afterthought in your edge nodes, right? So we all know you're going to be disconnected. So are you building your mission profiles to truly think about how you're going to be disconnected, what that mission is going to look like, and can you maintain operations and C2 in that disconnected environment? I do think there are some industry solutions that are out there right now, if we can actually harness those and bring those into where our offices are and where our warfighters are at.
One, I think if it takes into account like what information you're trying to change, like if you've already built into it, like here's the different data standards that have to like feed through these different boxes. So if you're integrating one set of technology at the edge, does it talk to this different set of technology, or do I have to have like a proliferation of that specific kit, or can it just take into account interoperability as far forward as possible?
Right.
Yeah, I'm a little biased as the agentic AI lead for Mar4PAC, but I think agentic AI, it's become a pretty big buzzword, but I think that is one of the technologies, or the technology that I'm most excited about in terms of increasing combat power. going back to doctrine, the speed, which is a universally significant generator of combat power, the speed that agentic AI solutions will grant our staffs, our commanders, in terms of decision making and process optimization, there is incredible promise there. And so we're looking at things like edge processing, these GPU-enabled edge compute boxes, and then also small language models, so agentic frameworks based on small language models that have been trained perhaps on military doctrine and SOPs. So looking at those kinds of things so that we can enable our tactical commanders, 05 or even below, so that they can continue to leverage the capability provided by these systems, even in DDoS environments. But we're working through what a optimal multi-agent system would look like, not even from like a horizontal perspective, like across a military staff. Say you have an operations agent maybe and a logistics agent, but even vertically up and down echelon. If we have our tactical units on their edge compute kits with a local model, how does that interact with what our operational leaders in the higher echelons are using from a more enterprise perspective? So those are some of the questions that we're looking at when it comes to implementing agentic AI, which I see as very promising. But it goes back to like network orchestration. You can apply it in all of the functions of warfighting. And so it really comes back to intelligent automation and increasing the speed to decision and action for our warfighters across the entire formation.
So to piggyback off of that, in terms of the closer we get to true artificial intelligence, like AGI, artificial general intelligence, I think of AGI as an easy way to explain it is having a artificial intelligence node or an entity, right, that is akin to a competent coworker, right? So imagine having a competent coworker at the edge, right, with much more data and much more information than any human could possibly have, at the level of somebody that you would work with every day. And that, I think, is a absolutely integral part of applying force multipliers for our warfighters at the edge and helping them make those decisions. The closer we get to this AGI, or even better, AI to AI, sustained learning capabilities, so that AI doesn't train AI and becomes gibberish, as it sometimes comes, right? But this all comes back to, one, we have to get to that point, and two, we have to figure out our own networks, because right now we do have a problem with an overcomplication of our networks, both strategic and our coalition and partner networks. We need to simplify them, because at the end of the day, we're trying to facilitate a kill web, not a kill spaghetti, right? So that's just my thoughts on the subject, and I think that's the way forward and how we should look at it.
So I'm going to have one last question and then open it up to questions from the audience. But I kind of want to go down the line on this. In your experience, what are the trade-offs between optimizing for mission performance versus maintaining interoperability in the DDIL architecture? DDIL architecture.
The trade-offs?
Yes.
Question? Well, everybody's advancing. We can't rest on our laurels because the other guy is not. So the trade-off is we build risk by not keeping pace from a technological and systems overmatch perspective. So the idea is we train to a standard. We meet that standard. Once we reach the standard, it's going to be easier to meet it. And as we continue to train to sustain that standard, then after meeting it, we'll have more opportunity for that exploration side of things, where we can experiment with new technologies. Like when we go and essentially solicit Marine Corps participants in experiments, is them rogering themselves up because they know their workload. So essentially the space has to exist. We create that space by training them to a standard, and then they have additional space because it becomes not necessarily going through the motion, because they should never do that, but they're well practiced, they have more space to explore emerging technologies, and through partnerships with organizations like the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab and the Marine Corps Tactical System Support Activity, who have engineers dedicated to RDT&E, through our interfacing with them, we'll get their feedback to select the technology that make the most sense, and then we'll go and get it in the hands of operators and get their feedback from a user and operational perspective, and implement it that way. Does that answer the question?
I think that was a fantastic answer. Thank you. Christy?
The architecture, in particular in the space layer, needs to really be flexible for both. So trade-offs for both mission resiliency and interoperability. Again, the customers, the Space Force customers I support, in their good enough model and moving fast is really looking at mature tech, costs, and interoperability, and then spiraling and changing that as fast as they can. I think what's interesting over the last, 5 to 10 years, you're seeing multi-orbital, GEO, MEO, LEO considerations and interoperability between the constellations themselves, which is interesting because then there's a less reliance on like a single constellation that was perfect and had the high mission impact, but it came at time, it came at cost, and often the interoperability may or may not have been there. And I'd say one of the other things that within the space defense industry itself, the improvement of laser communications and being able to optically link between one mesh layer, either if you're in low Earth orbit or commercial and military constellation, what have you. But that technology and the advancement of being able to push your data around where you need to between mesh networks, either in the space layer or in the ground mesh architecture, I think that's where your trade-offs start to come in that example. So do you have to pick mission resiliency over interoperability, or do you have optionality at this point to go across different architectures to push your data where it needs to go? And then do you have the ground infrastructure in place, and have you built out that mesh connectivity in the same manner to be able to own your data, pick your mission profile, and then figure out where it needs to go and not worry so much about interoperability based off of, not perfecting that solution, but maybe offloading it and moving it around.
Great answer. Thank you so much. Mr. Delgado?
So for me, the crux of the problem between operations and innovation is that we have to look at it in a way that one builds off the other, right? Innovation is an iterative process. Then implementing them in operations now and being not unafraid, but being able to fail now is I think, a better choice than failing 2 years down the road. If you're afraid to test today, you're going to be terrified of testing 2 years from now. Because at that point, innovation's done, right? We're at the point where our time limit is here or something happens, it's too late. So being able to really innovate now than later, taking industry, taking your joint partners, your coalition partners across the theater, and integrating them into your operations today, and really fighting for that capability now is definitely something that we should strive for. Even things like integrating partner nation national networks into our coalition networks it's being done right now with the Indo-PACOM Mission Network, and it's being talked about. But again, innovation builds off operations, and operations cannot at this point be afraid to integrate innovation. And we have to look at it that way and drive forward doing that, because soon enough, we will not have that luxury of failing.
Thank you.
Lots of thoughts in my head, but I think going off of the comment that was made about like how we have like sometimes a spaghetti like architecture that kind of like exists. I think the challenge of innovation is like, if you're continuing to sprint forward, and we understand that industry can like move quickly, like much faster than we can. Sometimes the challenge is just knowing what you have right away, and like knowing where your friction points are. You get used to seeing a lot of like overview diagrams that like have lightning bolts that tell you like these things are going to connect. But then when you start to peel back the onion of like, okay, like where is that server or where is that radio, like that, then you start to realize where some of your gaps are, and your actual ability to like leverage the architecture as it exists today to be able to meet the operations that you have. So I think the risk is as you innovate fast and you iterate potentially too quickly, like if you don't have that foundation of like, this is where I exist, this is how we do it today, and then start to iterate and then work quickly, like get to fail quickly and then like be okay with that, which from as an organization or a culture, I think we struggle with that. We struggle with creating the PowerPoint that says like, hey boss, like this didn't go good, like and we got to change directions. But as we partner with industry and with cross components, like that's what we have to do. Like understand where we're at, like get after it quickly, and then be able to like fail and shift, which is easier said than done.
Ain't that the truth in everything, right? Well, wonderful. Thank you all for being here. This was incredible. I think we might have like kind of come a little close to our time limit. So if anyone has any questions for the panelists, we are rolling directly into the networking reception. So the panelists will be around hopefully for a little while, and we'll have some mingling. Did you want to come up and close us out? Do we have time? Do we have questions?
We do have time for a question or two.
Okay.
First question, what are some ways joint forces are exercising analog systems and processes to prepare for a DDIL environment, and how do we emphasize training analog systems when there is a push for using cutting-edge technological solutions?
I didn't write that question though, I swear, but I wish I would have. It's an interesting one.
Okay.
So the question was, how are we analyzing, where's the question being asked from?
They put it in the questions queue. There's like yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, I
Sorry.
didn't know if somebody was out there asking. When it comes to analyzing analog processes, okay, I see the question on the screen.
I can kind of.
I mean, I think when you look at the pace at which Indo-PACOM like exercises, like the different exercises that we do kind of across the region, how are we exercising it is those analog systems, those are the ones that we have and those are the ones that we bring.
Yep.
I mean, I think that you have different activities and exercises where you specifically you work to incorporate science and technology into it, and that becomes a problem of the communicator as I try and like fuse technology into already a standing like set of systems that we have. And so I think that we are leveraging those because those are the systems that are passing data. I think that the challenge is, and again, it's a cultural challenge of like being willing to step away and say, hey, like we're gonna shut off the network and we're gonna go to HF, or we're gonna go to like TAC chat and like what is the critical data that I need to do to be able to like punch into a 6 line and be able to send to somebody to be able to like fire a missile like that. Like culturally, like we fight against it, and as a commo, like for me personally, like tons of scar tissue of like the general wants a VTC. And in that VTC, he also talks about like, well, we got to do this in a DDIL environment, but I still want my VTC. Like that's just the wrestle that we play with internally, and like that's looking bigger, like that's the wrestle between analog systems and technology. Like we're fighting that same battle. How are we doing it? I don't know. It's a daily struggle.
I think at the warfighter level, having those analog systems being understood and trained on by our warfighters in theater is, I think, for me, just as important as having innovative technologies available for them. Because in a true crisis situation where things happen that is unpredictable, they may not have access to node 1 or network 2 or none of the above because they are in a true crisis situation. So being able to understand that there may be situations that they're put in where they have to rely on analog processes and systems because that's the only thing that's available to them, right? At the end of the day, something like a compass is technically an analog system or a process, right? And it's important for the warfighter to understand the basic warfighting functions at the most basic level being a compass and a map, but also being trained, because they're smart enough now to understand both of them. They can brush their teeth and get on a computer. They understand analog and technology, right? So they can do both. Being able to train on both of them doesn't mean you have to sacrifice one for the other. A warfighter is a holistic asset on the battlefield, and they're way smarter. They're much smarter than a lot of us give them credit for sometimes. And you have to keep that in your mind when you really think about training analog and innovative technologies.
Yeah, I think this comes back to like having training and readiness standards that we have in place. We're well aware of the essential tasks that we need to accomplish. We have training and readiness standards associated with them and analog systems that we know that can be used to exercise those tasks and meet those standards. So we'll continuously do that and do certification exercises for deployment and otherwise. And that's where we really get at the analog systems, the stuff that's been around. And then kind of going back to like the conversation of fail, no fail. Generally with experiments, you're not going to, at least from a warfighter perspective, it's not a certification that we're working towards with an experiment. And there are quite a few people that appreciate that aspect of experiments, and people want to bring a lot of emerging tech on because they're confident in their ability to meet the standards. And so I think that's where the balance lies, is having well-defined standards, training to those, making those essentially the must-haves and must-dos, and once you're confident you can reach those, then exploring the emerging tech.
Definitely. I mean, yeah, that's just turns into such a norm, like in our day-to-day, right? Like as much as we're pushing emerging technologies and especially in a emerging leader category, like that is our main focus is emerging technologies. But so many of the times, especially like in the Navy and when you're forward deployed, you do have to rely on those analog systems, and you don't have a choice, and it is adapt and overcome, right? So I think that's a fantastic question of one of those things, like we do have to adapt sometimes and fall back on the origination, like the very beginning of transport, right? And it's just the fun of the DDIL space.
We have time for one more quick one.
Okay.
In the context
Quick
of
one.
today's discussion, if you could have your leadership grant you one wish, what would it be and why?
That's a scary question.
I would wish for money. And I'm sure every other leader would wish for the same thing.
Yeah, procurement cycles.
Yeah. Yeah, if I had one wish, that would be it. How about $1 trillion?
You can go.
Oh.
So for us, I would say that, I would have to agree with you. If I had unlimited capital, I could make magical things happen in theater, but I don't, so I work with what I have. But yes, that would be my one wish. Sir, please give me more money.
Shoot. I think the missions are just complex, and so I think if clarity of direction, I think it's difficult to kind of figure out. Like we want to do all the things like as technology and as like engineers, like we'll get after and solve those things, but sometimes it's difficult to paint the picture. Like, I think that's, like, I've been told before, like, I don't know what good art is until I see it. And so at an action officer level, like, you're then iterating on things, like, to try and get after what that, like, Picasso looks like. And so I think that, you know, being able to have some of that clarity, but, like, at the same time, like, I don't want to be in their shoes that tries to define, like, what that picture looks like, because that's a difficult picture to paint for anybody. And I don't think AI is going to do it for you, or you don't want it to.
That's a fantastic answer. Wonderful.
Thank you. Please welcome Shantae Russell back to the stage.
Okay, what a wonderful panel. Thank you to our panelists for a very insightful discussion today and the perspectives that you've all shared. As a thank you, AFCEA International and AFCEA Hawaii will be donating in your honor to the Friends of the Windward Wounded Warriors. I truly hope that you enjoy the rest of your time at the conference and appreciate your time and attention for our panel today. Thank you.